Chapter 1. Oliver quickened his footsteps as he neared the end of Hall B on subsection Delta. No need to rush now, he mumbled to himself. Only a matter of 20 meters to the escape hatch. His hair was matted and clinging to his face and neck. Running his hand through it a few times only caused it to look more frayed, with the end result leaving a few wild hairs jotted out in odd, sharp angles. His face, in a lipid of inconsolable, throbbing soreness, was covered in blood, mostly smeared and beginning to dry. Oliver pawed at his face again, hoping to end the constant and unbearable twitching itch that was starting to interfere with his concentration. His mixed suit, which was never intended for combat use, was covered in blood spatter. The top left shoulder of the suit was torn, revealing a reddened, scraped patch of flesh. Boy, did that hurt. A scorched horizontal outlet on the right ribcage side of the suit, caused from a sonic pulse gun blast, revealed a burnt line of skin that traced the width of the hole. Ouch. A 1.5-foot diagonal slash starting at the left breastbone, transversing across the stomach, and ending just shy of the right hip bone, was the last imperfection of the suit. Fresh blood continued to saturate the fabric. Beside those flaws, the suit was in immaculate condition. The mixed suit, an iconic staple in itself, stands for multi-purpose itinerant civilian suit. Oliver thought it was a fancy name for an outfit full of holes. Some armor plating, pulse deflection, and less irritating fabric would have served better for Oliver. Oliver's hands had stopped shaking. Under the circumstances, it allowed a more precise aim with the quib rifle for the next zombie, alien, or Zomblin. Incidentally, Oliver had reverted to Zomblin since he didn't know whether to refer to them as alien zombies or zombie aliens. He had come up with a few more: Albie, Azom, Alzom, and his favorite. What the fuck is that? The latter he used the most in normal screams of panic upon confronting one. Oliver had combated more Zomblins than he had ever wished he had to. None would have been a lovely number, though bad luck had undermined that. He had skirmished with Zomblins, zombies, aliens, and men. Not many of these clashes were toe-to-toe fights. Some involved firefights, others hand-to-hand. All of them had drained Oliver's strength and had injured him as each match after the other added up. On every encounter, Oliver did his best not to panic. He kept his mind as clear as possible to ensure that he had a working, loaded weapon to defend himself against all those trying to kill him. Oliver was not ashamed to say that when the world around him got dicey and hell came knocking down the door, Oliver's plan was to run. He who runs away lives to see another day, hour, minute, second more. You get the picture. Oliver was exhausted. The mere fact that he was still standing astonished him. More amazing than that, he was still moving, pained, slowed, beat to fuck, but still moving towards that eye-watering hatch. The most shocking thing, however, Oliver was still breathing and alive. Unbelievable. Against odds no one should have survived nor lived through, Oliver had bested them all. Oliver drug his feet across the titanium floor of the spaceship Fawnies rather than walked. His breathing, if one could call it that, was a haggled spasm of repeating coughs as he inhaled and exhaled pithily. His arms, legs, and each wound bawled in harmony as he crossed the hallway towards the hatch. Meanwhile, Oliver's mind was left to balance all of his emotions and thoughts into a thralling, emblematic reply of all his mistakes. What could he have done differently? Oliver never enjoyed pain. He often avoided pain from happening by avoiding it. However, as Oliver's mind condensed all the lives that he had held himself responsible for, all the ones he himself ended, Oliver wished for more pain, if only it would take his mind away from the guilt that was eating him alive. The guilt was eating him up. That was the truth of the matter, crippling him worse than everything else combined. No matter how much he suffered from his wounds, and in truth, his wounds were killing him. The guilt was killing him faster. With each step, however strained it seemed from his injuries, the damage dealt to his heart was worse. What guilt wrought against this man's soul as he stood a mere 20 meters away from the escape hatch. Oliver wavered as his left knee gave out when he put pressure on it. Oliver grabbed at the wall's handrail hard to prevent him from hitting the floor. His strength was leaving him quickly, and using his back and shoulders to stumble onward was wearing him out fast. The strap of the quib rifle tightened and dug into his gaping wound, and Oliver knew he was about to pass out. He had forgotten about his weapon in the lunge for the handrail. It had been strapped over his shoulder and now dangled and swayed, rubbing and tearing at his exposed, bleeding flesh. Only he could take his hands off that handrail for a second and remove that damn piece of shit gun from around his neck and be rid of it for good. He wasn't a soldier. He didn't want it reminding him of the death it had wrought against those it was fired on. A flash of memory passed before his eyes. A little girl, small and bloody, covered in gore and riddled with bullet holes. She walked so slow, like a haunt or specter, gliding across the floor. She held a dripping human eye in her left hand. From how she held it, Oliver believed she had forgot it was even there. The grip was loose, and as she drew closer, he could see it slipping out of her clutches as it bobbed and weaved in her blood-soaked hand. Her other hand, not a hand anymore, was a freakishly pink mess, sparkled with oozing shades of red, and mixed in with it were even darker hues, to the point of black. Oliver, against the fear and the revulsion, just wanted to gather her up into his arms and make this wreck of a girl whole again. He had known her, not like this, as a sweet, gentle child of only 8 years old at the most. Her hair was styled and golden, blonde with a cute ladybug barrette, holding her hair out of her soft and pretty face that shined with the broadest of smiles. He would often see her dancing and twirling in places a child her size had no business belonging in. With not many children on board, she had become a nuisance to her parents and the crew, who had complained she was always in everyone's way. Oliver, however, thought of her as a free spirit, not to be concerned with the woes of the Delts that towered over her. She was a little hot-tempered too, when she often discovered her playtime was interrupted by those harsh and stern faces that made her leave the corridors and be forced to return to her confine of a room. This was the girl he remembered, the girl with rosy cheeks and a pink tongue, that she stuck out all the time and would run away giggling as her parents would pursue her amongst the normal crowd of crew that was passing on their way. Before him now was a disaster of what she was, a horror with a misshapen frame, and Oliver wasn't sure if he wanted to cry or vomit. The eye finally slipped out of her hand and bounced on the floor with a sloshingly wet noise as it rolled and stopped at the feet of Oliver. Her eyes fixated on him, and their bright green emeralds were strained with red lines and blood spots. Her mouth curled open, and thick red slime escaped her mouth as her teeth clenched and then opened, making a sound with her jaw like a hinge of an old truck that just popped open and then was quickly shut. Oliver knew she wasn't human anymore. The girl was beyond saving. All Oliver wanted to do was close his eyes and make this all go away. He needed to wake up from this nightmare and see her like before again. His eyes watered and his face became wet as he grabbed his rifle with both hands and brought it down against the top of her head in a bashing swoop. She had lunged at Oliver when he did this, and her scream was a deep gargle that stuck in her throat. She had planned to sink her teeth into his abdomen and rip into him and taste his blood on that pink tongue of hers. The stock of the rifle made a thud noise, and Oliver felt the top of her skull crunch as she toppled over from the blow. She lay thrashing in a slow, maddening spasm to regain her footing. The pool of blood her body was spewing on the floor was making this impossible for her to do. Oliver couldn't take the sight anymore. He had just struck her in the face, had bloodied her forehead, and had added to her disfigurement. Inside, he felt more the monster than this little zombie looked to him. Was it really the right thing to do? Oliver raged inside his mind. Was it really the right thing to do? As he pointed the sights of the rifle down to align with her face, he felt like he was the one death was making its last approach to. As he pulled the trigger and ended her life, his doubts were removed. Sagging his shoulders, fighting back the tears, Oliver stared at her broken body lying in the bloody heap, and Oliver stood deader and colder, little Zoe laying on the floor. The memory didn't end to Oliver's surprise, but freeze-framed on that girl's face. The shock of it had taken his breath away, and his legs and arms had locked into place. He trembled as the image slowly faded into the back of his mind at last. Oliver couldn't move, which reminded him of his dire situation. He was breaking mentally, and this wasn't the time to start falling apart. His progress so far would be in vain if he continued to stand here, unmoving, and in no position to fight back if anything happened to stumble upon him. He coughed, then the reverberation from his wheezing lungs told him he was close to death. The blood that splattered the wall didn't help lessen this grim truth any either. Turning his head slowly, Oliver looked back into the direction he had transversed to check if anyone or anything was following him. Oliver didn't know if it was from his extended duration of duress or his current state of mind that brought him back into full perspective as he felt suddenly not alone. Oliver knew if he went down, if his hand slipped and he collapsed onto the floor, he'd never have the strength to get back up. He could crawl, though. He could still damn well try to crawl to the hatch. Leave a trail for those bastards to follow me, thought Oliver. Only I won't be here once to do. I'll be hundreds of miles away. Most likely dead from blood loss and dehydration, but I won't be your freaking snack, will I? I won't be one of you in the end. My family could even bury me proper and not worry that I'll dig my way out of the grave and roam the streets, searching for a stray cat or a vagrant to munch on. It was now or never, and with his attitude soaring into morbid humor, Oliver pushed with every muscle and every ounce of strength he had left to start moving once more. He shifted his grip and moved his left leg, and he did not fall. Then his right leg. He was moving again, and after several steps he discovered he had regained some of his energy from his sustained hold. How long had he clung there to that wall, deep in thought? Had time abandoned him? Had what he thought to have been minutes actually been hours? Could he have leaned half-braced, straining against the rail, in complete self-reflection and contemplation for hours? What a sight it would have been to a watchful eye to see a battered man, unmoving, detached, and completely oblivious as hour after hour passed, and he didn't even move one muscle. Oliver's mind was splintering, and even though he was moving again, Oliver was not aware mentally that he was physically only 10 meters away from the hatch he had come so far to reach. Oliver, in his worsening state, seemed to have forgotten about the hatch, forgotten about many of the things, and only continued to sink inward. It wasn't the ship Oliver was escaping, but rather his mind, which had become a vague contagion of an inadequate disposition. He needed to escape, but from himself, not just from this damn ship. Oliver drifted through his thoughts. His family back on Earth consisted of his mother and father, Betty and Albert Pierce, his older sister Henrietta, mother of 2 spoiled brats named Jimmy and Carol. Penelope was his younger sister, a sweet teenager with a lot of growing up to do, and a long list of IOUs to her big brother Oliver. Oliver missed them so much right now. He wished he could time travel back into the past, before everything went wrong, and just tell them how much he loved them. Ouch! It was the impact that snapped Oliver back to reality and brought him back to his senses. His nose was sore and bleeding. Someone had punched him in the face. Dumbfounded and pissed, Oliver stared at the enemy that had dared punch him. To Oliver's astonishment, he was pressed up against the hatch. He had walked right into the damn door, face first. He had made it. Behind this hatchway door was his family and the Earth some 50,000 miles away. A new thought crossed over Oliver's focus as he wondered if he would ever be able to open the door. He had made it to the hatch by pure will alone. Oliver believed that if it not for his will to make it to that damned hatch, he'd be curled into a ball and enjoying death as he sucked his thumb. Oliver flexed his arm muscles and forced himself horizontal. He clenched his teeth and asserted his will towards his buckling left knee. It shuddered, and a loud pop echoed from the socket. Oliver winced from the tremor of soreness. His knee was dislocated. Oliver braced his weight with his arm holding the door release. He did this several times as he heaved and pulled to open the latch. Tears dripped down his ashen face as he grunted and howled with each failed attempt to turn the release wheel. What would Oliver do if the hatch wouldn't open? Would he just slump against it and ultimately die? Would he use the last of his energy to pound his fists against it as he screamed at the top of his lungs till a Zombie came and finished what all the others before it had failed to do? Thinking just that, Oliver began to chuckle. The act, if observed in its current state, would have seemed morbid and downright creepy. Oliver in truth knew that if a Zombie showed up before he opened the hatch, now that his knee was dislocated, the game would be over. He doubted he could even bring his rifle up in time to fire a shot before it was atop him, ripping him into pieces. Oliver, said a female voice he knew all too well behind him. Oliver knew the woman's voice, but it couldn't be. It couldn't. And the voice came with insanity. Only a madman would believe it was her. Oliver dared not look and see a phantom looming behind him, wearing a mask of vacillation, while luring him only to turn around and face his own cynicism. You can't be real, bellowed Oliver, as fresh tears rekindled behind his eyes. The words softly leaving the woman's lips replied, I'm as real as you want me to be, Oliver. I even forgive you if only you turn around and look me in the eyes. Terror streamed outward from the deepest recesses of Oliver's heart. He felt lightheaded, as if all the blood in his body had drained and collected into the bottom of his soles. He had to bolt. His feet were on fire. He could feel the blood bubbling and itching his toes. You're dead, Oliver screeched at the phantom behind him. A hand touched his shoulder, sending the coldest chill down Oliver's spine. Do you think me a ghost, then, Oliver? I'm alive, and right here, you fool. All you have to do is face me and see that I'm flesh and blood. The voice from beyond the grave whispered into Oliver's ear. Oliver turned, straining to keep his balance. Oh my God! Oh my God! Uttered Oliver in shock.